Welcome to the Science for the Public lecture series. Science for the Public is an organization committed to bringing science information and issues to the general public. Visit our website for our program listings and blog.
Good evening and welcome to Contemporary Science Issues and Innovations. I'm Yvonne Stapp for Science for the Public. Tonight we welcome Irene Porro, Outreach Programs Officer for the Office of Engineering Outreach Programs in the School of Engineering at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Porro received her PhD in Space Science and Technology from the University of Padua in 1996. Her research focused on ground and space-based stellar interferometry and was carried out during a 3-year fellowship at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics here in Cambridge. During her training in astrophysics, Dr. Porro had been involved in science education, and ultimately she decided to pursue a career in education outreach. For the past 12 years, she's done so at MIT, first as a science educator, then as Director of Science Education and Outreach Programs for the Kavli Institute for Astrophysics and Space Research, and now as Outreach Programs Officer within the School of Engineering at MIT. Tonight, Dr. Porro will explain just what university outreach programs do and how they encourage young people who are interested in science and engineering. She'll tell us about the challenges of outreach and the potential of such programs to improve the skills of American students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's a great pleasure to welcome Irene Porro. Welcome.
Thank you, Yvonne.
And I'd like to start with just getting some background for a general public. I think most of us don't know a lot about these outreach programs. It's my understanding that most of the institutions have outreach programs for especially students, but what motivates that? Can you give us that little bit of background?
A little bit of a general picture, if you want. You know, we have to say that universities and institutes of higher education probably had outreach programs in education and in science in particular that we are interested in tonight for a long time. I want to make sure that we don't think it is something that just happened recently. Certainly, again, universities have a long tradition in doing, you know, public events. In my field in astronomy, we could think about, you know, public viewing of the skies, maybe once a month or a few times a year. So events of that kind that always happen. However, here in particular in the United States, probably in the last, I would say 15 years, maybe 20, 15 years, there's been a new interest in working in outreach for research organizations, research teams at universities, in particular because a lot of the federal funding that has been coming to various research groups has also required that these research teams use some of their time and their talent in creating outreach activities to the benefit of the public in general. Immediate interest has been towards K-12 schools, but it's really an effort towards the general public. You know, and again, in my field, agencies like NASA and SF, for example, are being requiring literally that people who submit a science grant also have we call it either an education and outreach component or a broader impact component. NIH has the same, a Department of Education. They're big.
So all these federal things require
that. So again, there has been an incentive, and again, I think many universities are seen as an opportunity to expand some of the efforts that were already present and just, you know, build on their experience and do more. And for others, it's been a completely new experience. And so people have pretty much jumped into it with a lot of enthusiasm and I would say, and passion. Sometimes maybe with not a lot of preparation, but people have learned a lot. I think things have come a long way since like when I started about a dozen years ago, 12 years ago. Now, more recently, in the last probably 5, 6 years, there's been an increasing interest towards a different area that still, of course, involves science education. It's focused on science education, but this is focused on the development of what we call the STEM workforce, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. There has been a series of reports and discussions that really brought to light the fact that in the United States, not just in the United States, but certainly in our country, we are potentially going towards a crisis where we don't have enough people joining the workforce that have the skills and the knowledge that are requiring science, engineering, technology to really support our industry, even our defense industry.
Right.
So there has been a renewed interest in how do we improve, not just improve our science education, but how do we get more people interested in science education and pursuing science engineering careers.
I see. Now, in order to do that, they would have programs, and all of these universities, a lot of research institutions have them. Well, these programs are evidently diverse.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of what kinds of things do they contain? What do people do? Yeah.
Right, and you're right, because again, being a very diverse group of people that got involved in these initiatives, you have a very different array of programs that are offered. And so you go from one side, programs that are purely for exposure and engagement, maybe a one-day event. It could be a special activities, maybe scientists going to a school and doing some kind of activities there, or having a lab, or again an observatory that hosts a classroom or an after-school program, or again a family event for one day. So you go, and this we call them the exposure kind of activities, really to illustrate. Often people, for the first time, find out about professions and fields of research they never knew
Especially
before.
now, right? With all of these cross-disciplinary things, yes.
Absolutely. So you go from that to programs that are run maybe on a period of time where if we talk about young people, may engage the students during the after-school hours or during weekends, or other activities where you have, for example, scientists that visit classrooms on a regular basis. I used to be involved in a program where I will visit a class once a month. And again, it's still very much, though, at the level of introducing new fields, new ideas, and really get the students excited. And if it's in the after-school, really get the kids play with science. On the opposite extreme, you have programs that I think are the ones that have been in place for the longest time, but are really science and engineering enrichment programs. Now that's more of a field where I'm involved right now in my current position, where we're focusing more on if you want to selected audiences. These are young people already very much interested in science and engineering, and we put them in an environment where they can learn about science and engineering in a way they wouldn't be able to do it in school, and really to give them some little bit of an edge, because we know they have an interest. So again, the efforts span a whole range of both, I would say, again, the talent of the people and the interest of the people who provide the programs, but also are different programs because the audience is so diverse and needs different kind of interventions.
Right. On that point, where you mentioned that right now you are working with students with very high skills, and they're definitely going into these fields, but you've also worked with students like disadvantaged students. You reach out to very broad population. Right. How do they handle these different things? Seems to me it would be relatively easy to do the ones with the high skills, but if you want to help people catch up or whatever, what is that like, a challenge?
Right. It's an interesting thing is that, in particular now that we talk about, for example, STEM workforce development, I mean, we are implying that we don't have enough people to pursue certain careers. So I think for the programs that focus on students that already engage, it's great. And actually our focus in this case is really to focus on students from underserved population or that have been traditionally underrepresented. Because we understand that there is an extra support that we can provide to the students to make sure that they indeed pursue the careers that they really care about. On the other hand, though, we have a much larger segment of the population that is just hasn't been engaged. And so I spent many years, and this is still very much my strong interest and passion, working with young people who don't think they might be interested in science engineering, and actually showing to them how science engineering is actually done. That is a product of asking questions and being curious and being really involved.
Sometimes being wrong.
Sometimes being wrong, absolutely.
Exactly. Start over.
So really presenting science and then technology, engineering, and math in a very different way. And so hopefully to create that spark, then makes them go back to school and actually appreciate and get more engaged in a regular school curriculum. But we clearly have an issue of not having people that think that, again, science, engineering, and math are something that they can be interested in and they can do. And we really have to work on that.
What can I just ask, what is your idea about what causes that? Why is there this diffidence about this kind of material, that it's so hard and everything?
If I had the right answer, probably
yeah, right.
could solve a lot of problems very quickly. I think, though, in my experience, typically with young people, is that sorry. They like sciences. We think, oh, they're not into it. No, they like science. Sometimes with engineering, they may not know exactly what it is about, but when they figure out, oh, it's about taking things apart, it's about solving problems.
If you could start with that.
They are into it.
Yeah.
But so it's not so much creating the engagement part and the excitement. That's there. But then is when we present the fact that, well, there is a rigor, like for any other discipline for my mother. It's not just about science engineering, but there is certain rigor associated with that. And yes, math is very important. I think that's when we start putting together the fact that you have to spend time and you have to apply yourself not just to the excitement of science, but use the language of science, which is math. So you have to learn with new language. Again, and I don't think, again, that students necessarily don't like math in this case, but they're not prepared.
Yes. Okay.
And so if they are not prepared, they don't have the right tools to deal with the subjects, then they don't succeed in their task, in their little tests, not the tests in school, but really the activities where we present the investigations. And if they cannot succeed, then little by little, then they lose interest.
Yes.
So it's a question really of stimulating their interest and giving them the tools and the skills to be able to do well.
Can you give, seems to me that you start out with the right idea, the right approach and everything, and then you're met with perhaps insufficient preparation, and the students feel like, well, there's something wrong with me, I can't do this, or whatever. But you're not in a position, the big institutions, the educational institutions are not in a position to fix that gap themselves. That seems to me a major challenge. Is it, and what can you do, or do you have strategies for getting through this?
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, I think that's correct. That's the issue. I mean, to be fair, I mean, schools, if we talk about the K-12 school system, deal with this issue on a regular basis. I think there are principals, administrators, and teachers who are really working on this issue. But often it's very hard for them to deal with trying to change the way we're teaching, because I think there is a lot to be said about the way we're teaching. And still, they still have to run the classroom. So you still have to run the everyday work. So I think in terms of higher education institution, university, we can really provide support, and we can do some of the work that they might want to do in school and they cannot.
Yes.
And again, engage young people in a way where they get excited about the science and they understand in order to do it, they have to acquire these other skills, and we provide those.
Yes.
And also we show to them they can acquire them in school. So I see, again, this is my approach, but I think other people, other of my colleagues at various universities could say the same, is that we operate in a way where we want to complement and support what happens in a regular school setting.
Right.
And again, at the same time, I know personally I'm involved in some of these activities of school reform, and particularly in a science education. These days we are talking about what are called the next generation science standards. If this work that is progressing is very exciting, but if we're going to implement these new standards in the schools, teachers will need the help to actually implement them. And I think universities have a great role in supporting this effort.
And I guess you need community support on top of that. That seems to be like sometimes a missing element.
Right.
But it's a much more comprehensive effort than just the student and here's the program, whether it's in the school or in the institution or whatever. Before we leave that, I think you mentioned to me that the institutions or programs are not, they usually cannot be available to everybody, and that has to do with who is funding and so on. So if there were students in Belmont or whatever, or students in Cambridge, and then how do they find out what's available, and how do you decide who to serve?
Right. I mean, there is a lot to be said in terms of the agencies or the programs, or the institution, be foundations, corporations, or again the federal government who fund the programs. Put some limitations sometimes, and not strict limitations. So, but it's important that for people who are interested in looking for programs for their children. For example, if I go to a place like MIT, MIT actually has a website that lists all the outreach and education programs that are available at MIT.
All right.
So what people need to be just aware of, that it is possible that, like for some of the programs that I work with, because of our funding sources, we need to focus on certain communities. It's because the foundations that are funding us really make it an incredible effort focused on specific communities. So they are funding us to bring our resources to these communities. But in general, I mean, there is such a wide range of programs. Just in a place like MIT, if you go to Harvard, you will find the same thing. You go to Northeastern. So there is going to be other programs that actually are open absolutely to all students. Now,
so nobody's really shut out.
Absolutely not. No, it would be really contradiction. We want to do outreach.
That's right.
But sometimes we specialize. We specialize in certain areas. Also, there is a difference between programs that are open to all students, independent of what their current interest or background in science and math is, which is, for example, what I've done for the past 10 years. But now, for example, some of the programs we run are really at a very high level in terms, as I said before, we look for students who already have a strong interest in math and science, and they have grades to support that. I think two programs are serving two different audiences, and again, we need both to address these big issues of science education. But again, people should just be aware that just because maybe their children cannot attend the program, there are other 10 that they can.
It seems as though every institution has them, and that there is this variation in programs that you mentioned. So if parents or teachers are interested, they need only look, and actually these institutions probably contact schools, and there's some probably...
Usually, I mean, many of these institutions do a direct outreach in terms to the schools, for example. But I always suggest that families, for example, parents go and look at on the main website of a university and search for community outreach. I think most universities have a list of the programs they offer, and with the age group, for example. Some programs are just for middle schoolers, are only for high schoolers. And once in a while, there are programs just for girls. We have a program just for boys because in certain environments, it's very important to support boys. So again, but but I still have to say there are probably 10 programs for girls and 1 for boys. So
okay,
we balance things out.
All right. And now you have had probably a very unique experience in doing a very interesting program for which you got a lot of praise, and I'd like to talk about that. And now you're doing a very different one. So the first one was in astrophysics, and the second one now is in engineering. And so I think not many people get to cover such ground as this, and you need to know something about these fields, evidently, you know, to work with them. Would you please tell us about
Sure.
that wonderful program that you did at the Kavli?
And just not to get in trouble with any engineer, of course, I'm a physicist, I'm an astrophysicist, but I often worked for my professional work with engineers. So
Yes.
I can talk
You
to
love
engineers.
yes. Okay.
I just don't want to say that I'm an engineer. But again, before coming to the School of Engineering, I was at MIT Kavli Institute for Astrophysics and Space Research. And there I was able to implement a series of outreach programs for astronomy and astrophysics, but one in particular was called the Youth Astronomy Apprenticeship. And this was a program that was designed to reach out to urban communities. So we mainly had students from the Boston area, not only though, as long as they could use public transportation and get into town, we were just open to everyone. And the goal was, in this case, we were looking for young people who wouldn't say no to an engagement with science, but they were not already hooked, but they were open to try. And so the idea was to engage them in actual astronomy activities, but again, very hands-on. They were using robotic telescopes. For many years, I've been collaborating with the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, where I used to work, and the science education department over there created a program that is based on the use of robotic telescopes. So youth can actually go online and use a web interface to control a telescope. So
they didn't even need to go to the Kavli.
No, and we literally were doing astronomy in the afternoon during the daytime.
That's
she
right.
Said, no,
That's right.
In basements often.
Yeah.
And young people, because they were able to plan their observation, and the telescopes would operate at night, of course. But so the students were really introduced to astronomy. Often, you know, it's a new field, a new discipline. And we were introduced to some of the rigor that it requires to do proper observations. And then this would happen during the school year. And then for the summer, we would have usually about 30 open positions. These were paid positions for actually some of the students working in astronomy to join us to create outreach initiatives for the general public at this point. So we had about 30 high school students every year for 5 years, different group. Many of them actually wanted to come back and continue their experience. Some of them actually became our interns and our staff. But the idea was during the summer they work on 3 different projects. We had always a project to create a museum exhibit on, again, astronomy-related topic. We work with professional museum developers, and the first exhibit, we were actually part of a professional exhibits where our youth developed 3 of the exhibits on the larger one. And this is a traveling exhibit that's been going across the country. Yeah, and it was about black holes. So we had a team on exhibits, a team of doing planetarium shows, being astronomy again. And so we had one of these portable, inflatable planetarium, and our youth not just, use the projector, but actually developed the scripts and presented the planetarium shows. That was always a big success with little kids, but also big kids. Adults love that as well.
Yeah.
And the third one, and one of my passions, it brings together 2 of my passions, is actually science theater. We collaborated with a theater company in Central Square.
Yes. What was the name of it?
Yeah, it's a Catalyst Collaborative. Yeah. It's one of the initiatives out of a the Central Square Theater in Cambridge. And they are a professional company that they perform plays that are about science and scientists. After attending one of her shows, I actually contacted the artistic director, and she said, well, of course we do youth theater too. And so we combined very experience, of course, in youth theater with our interest in science. And our youth actually developed their own scripts and perform plays about astronomy. So these 3 areas, you know, if you see the science theater, planetarium shows, and museum exhibits, are all different ways to approach science and approach science in a different way. The youth had to understand and really own the content, but also had to figure out how to present that to the public. And so for us was the perfect opportunity to again engage them meaningfully with science, and also to create a product that we could actually engage larger audiences. I mean, this youth presented at Cambridge Science Festival. We went to Washington, D.C. to present at the USA Science Engineering Festival. We've been presenting again at the Museum of Science for the exhibits at the MIT Museum. We've done various events at local communities. It's a whole packet. And so it's something that as experience I really care about, and I think what we accomplished with that was not necessary that all these young people became scientists and engineers. Probably a few, I know that about 50% of them continue to pursue science and engineering.
Well, that's significant.
It is. But what was more interesting for us is that they developed really an appreciation for this field. And in the evaluations that we did about the program, the factor that really scored the highest, the matrix score the highest, was the one relative to advocacy. The youth became advocates for science and science education themselves.
Well, that would be worth the whole thing, wouldn't it? Right.
One of these young men came back to us a couple of years later and saying, well, yeah, no, I'm studying business right now, but you know, as a parent, I'll make sure that my children actually have opportunity to attend programs like this one. That to me makes a big difference.
Of course. I know that was a particularly gratifying experience for you, because you were targeting a very comprehensive group of young people, I suppose. But I remember that it was very diverse. There were a lot of different activities in this whole thing. And so I think that must have been tremendously exciting. Yeah. Well, now then, you shifted over to engineering.
The School of Engineering. Actually, I joined the Office of Engineering Outreach Programs. That is an initiative that's been in place again for many years. And actually, they go back even before we had an office for outreach programs. MIT started 37 years ago. The program
it started right at the ground floor. It must have.
Oh,
That's very early.
Yeah. When the first program that was run out of what is today our office, the program is called MITES, and it stands for Minority Introduction to Engineering and Science. And again, when it started 37 years ago, it was really devoted to bring young men and women from minority groups to MIT to experience an environment where they were academically very prepared, and show to them that MIT was a place where they could actually be successful and flourish. So over the years, of course, the program is grown, and it's still very much devoted to reach out to underrepresented minorities, but students of all backgrounds are welcome. So our focus now is much more in reaching out students that are of low financial background, low income, and first-generation college students, for example.
I see.
So it's still our interest really to create a diverse pool of scientists and engineers, but really to reach out those students are really doing incredible work academically, and give them opportunities to actually immerse themselves for a summer in a place like MIT.
Yeah, so it's like a summer program.
It is a summer program.
In a lab or something.
Right.
Yes.
And so really it's a way for them to not just to prove to themselves that they can do this,
yes,
but to become familiar with the place. And you know, a high number of these students actually end up not just applying to MIT, but being
there.
So it's not, and I have to say that very clear. This is not necessarily a program just to take kids to MIT, but because of this experience, they feel like they can go anywhere they want.
Right.
And so the idea here, again, is a little bit different, you know.
Right.
So other programs we run is still very much into the engagement of a wider set of students. But some of the programs we do, again, are to make sure that the students who really want to excel in these fields have all the resources that we can offer.
Right. I would imagine you probably feel this is an important thing for science. Do you see this as a direction for science and engineering training? I ask that for one reason, well, because it takes a long time. People have to learn so much now.
Right.
The other is that there is so much convergence of fields. So you have geoengineering, you have bio, you have all of these fields, and scientists tell us that people really need like dual backgrounds anymore.
Sometimes.
Well, you're mentioning this sort of immersion kind of a program. Could you give us an example, and what do you think about that as a way to go?
Right. Well, again, I think we had to think about there are different needs that we can address. So the kind of program that I just described, it is really an intense 6 weeks at MIT, really immersion in this field. It is, and also I would add, just in case, this is a national program, so we recruit students from all over the country. Just to give an idea, out of 1,700 applications, only 80 students get to it.
Wow.
So I think this is a great program. I think we need it. So again, these young people really understand what it means to prepare to become an engineer, often, or also a physicist. But this is not, I mean, a program like this, I think, is very important, but it's not the solution to all the needs that we have.
Yes, I understand.
Because to be honest, we need people engaged at various levels. Even when we talk about, for example, STEM workforce development, there are a lot of jobs that require science, engineering, and math skills, but you don't need to be an MIT graduate. Not that there is anything wrong with that, but the point is that there is a much wider, again, set of needs that we can address. So I think we need some of these really immersion programs are great, in particular when we show to young people what you were talking about. There is much more an interdisciplinary approach.
And you don't know it until you get into it.
No,
that's what a lot of graduate students are discovering. Oh my gosh, I need to do this, I need to do that.
And I also would want to make sure that parents don't get the idea that now by the time they are in high school, students already need to know that there is time. That's what they will learn once they get into college. But just so that they have a flavor for what that is. But then again, there is an array of other different kind of programs that actually are addressing just the need to really create, if you wanted, a scientifically literate population, so that not only they are aware of the issues and they can, think when some of these issues emerge in a social context or, affects, I don't know, health issues, and they can think about that, they can ask questions and not inform about these topics, but also they realize that there are opportunities for them to actually pursue careers in this field. I mean, to be honest, nowadays there are 2-year programs at community colleges that are very much focused on technology and engineering in certain fields of science, and people can really pursue very satisfying careers in those fields if that's what they are interested in. So I think what we need to do a much better job in coordinating the effort of the K-12 and a higher education world is actually really to coordinate our efforts, to make sure that when a young person it's towards the end of high school, that person knows about all the different possibilities that they have. And yes, they can pursue a career as an engineer at MIT if that's what they desire, but there are many other ways to get engaged in science and technology in different ways.
Do you have yourself with all this very interesting experience that you've had, any idea of how to deal with this kind of nexus between here's the K-12 system on the one hand, and a public that is that we're more and more required to know quite a lot, what we just have to kind of know to get along, and students don't know what's all out there, all the possibilities. And the universities, what can they do, or institutions, research institutions, and to take care of that gap? Have you come across any bright ideas for that?
We are. I should put a little plug. I'm writing a proposal to the National Science Foundation to do a research project on this.
Just happened.
Just happened. No, but it is indeed one of the conversations that
like
people in my field.
Thing.
Yeah, and I think one approach, again, what many people, many of my colleagues and I are doing is really to create this real conversation between the institution, not just institution of higher education at K-12, but also the industry. If we're thinking about people are not just going to college, then they're going to college often, because then they look for specific jobs. So there needs to be a much better conversation among all these different parts. And again, including then the families and society in general, to understand what the needs of the various fields are. So if what is academia that is interested in, what the industry is interested in, and to be able to explain so that to the K-12 system, these are the kind of knowledge and skills. I think we really have to work on skills. We cannot learn everything by the end of high school. Even if it was possible, I don't think it would be a good thing to do.
Seems like it's requiring a lifetime more and more.
But we can focus on skills.
Yes, and basics, perhaps.
And math, I have to say, definitely.
Yes.
But the point is that, to me, what is very important, I don't want to make this sound so much as this, we go to school just to get a job. Not that that's not important. That's very important. But I think it's important that we all work together to make sure that our young people understand that education is something they should pursue for their own sake.
Exactly.
And education is about science, is about technology, is about English and
arts,
literature and arts and philosophy.
Yes.
All of that, when all our students should leave high school equipped with all the information, resources, and skills to make the choices that best fit their personality, their interests, and their goals.
Yes.
And unfortunately, right now, too many students don't have that.
Well, a lot of students are not graduating now,
They're not graduating,
which is another
from high
kind of a
schools.
crisis.
Yes,
so
exactly.
So you have like a double concern from your perspective there. With you've dealt so much with these immersion kinds of programs. Now, intuitively, it seems to me that if I didn't know anything about math and I didn't like it and I didn't like science and all like this, but I had to solve a problem and it was mine and I had kind of could get involved in this, then the discovery of what one might need to know might encourage one then to do it differently from just being set with a textbook in a classroom. Has that been your experience, because you've dealt with all kinds of young people? Or would that help? Immersion, more immersions. You said only 80 get to go into this one program or something. So.
But the idea, yes, to present students and young people in general with, if it's not a problem, but, or something of interest to them. And to tell them, yes, you can approach it the way you want, but so by leading them to find out on their own what are the skills and the knowledge that they need to actually, again, if it's a problem to be solved or a project to create. When our youth were working on developing museum exhibits, they thought, okay, we'll do just something cool for people. They wanted a lot of people to come, see what they created, and enjoy it. Well, the reality is that, yeah, that's a great idea, and so we kept that. But how do you get there?
Yes.
So they not only had to learn, again, the material, but also had to learn how do you create an exhibit that is actually engaging and interesting for people. You don't want anybody to get bored looking at your presentation or so on. So that's the same thing. If we talk about engineering, I often want to talk to people, let's have young people choose among real problems that they have in their communities.
Yeah.
There is a big intersection where traffic is terrible and pollution at a very high level affects the health of many people. From an engineering point of view, we can approach it from an engineering point of view, but young people need to understand how is engineering doing that.
Right.
What is it? The math is getting into the picture.
Yes.
Because you have to be able to measure, to calculate, to predict, to model a situation. But the idea is that to use topics and again, situations that are of interest to young people.
And real, perhaps.
And real.
Yes,
real.
Right.
You know, it needs to become exactly something that is part of their life. And then that can really stimulate their interest in developing, again, the knowledge and the skills they need to do that. You know, when I mentioned before that we were doing science theater, why that? People say, oh, come on, do we need that? Well, yes. My goal was to engage young people that were saying, yeah, science sounds interesting, but what does it do to me? So theater is a way to turn a topic into something personal. Was making science personal. What did we talk about? We talked about the life cycle of stars. You know, like people are born and they grow up and die. Stars do the same. They're not people, but we can compare them to people. And life, the life of stars is very different depending on their personality in a way. Is that the size, the mass of a star that determines how long and how long it's going to live and how dramatically it's going to die. Our young people took a life of stars and turned them into life of people. And the person who was living the fast life was a big star that dies young.
Supernova.
And goes supernova. But the person in the play, the person who died, actually died, of course, it was in a car crash. And, you know, how many young people today deal with that issue, right?
A very good analogy.
So they put together the science and the personal relevance.
Yes.
And of course, that was not, you know, we had plays that were a little lighter. But again, we talked about searching for life on other planets.
Yes.
So what they were interested in is saying, how are people going to deal with this? Just the idea that there may be life on other planets. And so they interview people from different, you know, young people, older people, people with certain cultural backgrounds, people with other cultural backgrounds, and put together a play that represented the different ways how people dealt with that. So that was a way to actually lead the students to own this knowledge.
Right.
The same is that, again, dealing with an actual issue in their communities. It can be health-related, it can be traffic-related, it can be pollution-related, you know, but something that is meaningful to them.
Yes.
I think we need to do
a good
much.
To get started, yes.
But that's how everybody learns, right?
Exactly.
We learn about things that are meaningful to us, and somehow we forget to do that in our education programs a little bit too often.
But especially when people feel intimidated by the subject, I think that sounds like a wonderful way to close that gap, and I'm sure it was very successful. And it would be successful on many fronts. You know, I mean, with any age group, I would imagine. I would like to turn, as we're running out of time a little bit, and like you be able to talk to people a bit, take some questions and so on. I'd like to get some background about you, if I may. Now, how you got into all of this, you know, but you give us some idea about, like, how did you get into astrophysics in the first place and what made you shift over to education and so on, and the famous university you were at. Yes.
Okay, well, we'll have to keep it short, though.
That's
no, but it can be a long story. But I always been a very curious kid. I always loved to go to school. I mean, I loved it. And so my parents really didn't have to push me. But also, I think they, particularly my mom, was extremely supportive. My mom always told me, say, learn whatever you want. Just keep going to school, because when you win the Nobel Prize, I want to wear a nice dress and go to a ceremony. I had to figure out a way for my mom to wear the dress and way another, because it's not going to be the Nobel Prize ceremony. But the point is that, so I have a kind of encouragement. but not just my parents, none of my family really ever studied science or anything.
Now this was in
in Italy. Yeah,
so you grew up in Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I have the great interest, for philosophy and physics,
Which go together rather well.
Very
actually.
well.
Yes.
Actually, very well.
Right.
And I would say, thanks to what the skills again I developed in philosophy, they served me very well when I decided to study physics in college, and then specialize in astrophysics. I just been fascinated by, of course, the universe, but actually I was fascinated in building instruments to look at the sky.
Yes.
So this interest, again, I say I'm not an engineer, but I can talk to engineers.
Exactly, very nicely as it turns out. Now, you got your PhD at Padua,
yes.
right? And why is Padua so famous for astrophysics?
Well, because that's at the university where Galileo Galilei taught for many years. And if you have the opportunity to visit Padua, you can go to the university there, and they still have a desk from where he was teaching. It's holding together some way or another with some special glue. But so it's certainly, but that's only where, I did part of my PhD. I had to say I'm originally from Torino, though, which is another city in Italy that has a lot of scientists, and I was just like, okay, a few, other famous people.
Very naturally,
yes,
even if you didn't have scientists in the family, and perhaps I don't know if the school system was a little more encouraging there.
The school system, I mean, I think was encouraging in terms like we had to do it. I mean, everyone had to learn science and math independently of what their, real interests were. We studied calculus. Everyone in high school studied calculus. So, not all, the Italian system is slightly different, but certainly the kind of high school I attended, everyone studied calculus no matter what. That if they became, afterward we're lawyers, they still learn calculus.
Yes.
There was just a expectation that people would just learn foundations in math and science no matter what. So that really, again, really served me very well.
Yes.
Because, I never had a particular issue with this field. And I know we talked about this before, and certainly not being a girl was never a problem. It's exactly the opposite. I mean, girls were supposed to do well in math in high school. So almost like the opposite pressure, right? Like if you were not doing well as a girl, it was like, what's wrong with you? Right?
Oh, yeah. You're not living up to your gender there.
Yeah. So
I see.
So and in fact, I mean, it was many of my classmates and I were just doing very well and enjoyed it.
Never really thought about it, but you didn't have meltdowns when the test came or anything like that. Now, then you came to the United States to do this fellowship. Could you tell us about that?
Right.
That must have been exciting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as part of my PhD program, I applied for a Smithsonian, it's called a Smithsonian Fellowship for, again, graduate students. And I think it is devoted to students who come from other countries to really come to the United States to the research here and really to start this collaboration and really bring together all different kind of ideas and interest in science. So I spent 3 years at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, really getting, if you want, a little bit from the theory that I acquired in Italy at that point to really getting my hands dirty, and literally because I was working on an instrument that was located in Arizona on a beautiful top of Mount Hopkins in Arizona. So we were, putting together an interferometer, a special kind of telescope.
Yes.
And and I
had my put it together.
Literally, and once in a while, I got my branch, and it was a wonderful experience. A wonderful experience. So. And the whole program really allowed me to meet people, again, not just in the field of science, but also people from all over the world. It was extremely stimulating.
Yes. Now, and in this time, you evidently made another transition. I know you've had a great passion for education anyway, but you've had a very great interest in this. So before we close, could you tell us about that, how you made the shift to the education part of it?
It's very interesting because any once in a while I have some young researcher who approaches me and say, how was it? I'm like, what? What? And the transition, because they are thinking about the same and are a little nervous. For me, was, as you mentioned, it was something that I was doing without knowing that I was doing that. Since I was in Italy, I was engaged in various kind of outreach activities. Very, you know, any once in a while was not a regular activity, but clearly I enjoyed doing that. And then I got to a point where, still working on my research work, I started getting really involved in more regular activities to do outreach. I volunteered at the Boston Museum of Science for a while to really actually learn how to do that, because that's a point. A lot of scientists feel like they want to do it, but there is a lot to learn to be able to communicate to an audience, to be able to work with a classroom and young people.
Very diverse people.
Diverse, and
skills.
Again, for me, you know, coming from another country was interesting, I have to say, to learn about the American school system and a lot of issues that I didn't experience in my own country. But that only made me even more eager to get involved in education. And so at first, you know, it was kind of a 50-50. I was trying to do both jobs when I realized we're two full-time jobs. And so I just had the opportunity to move and to do outreach full-time. And I did that very easily in a way. I mean, I was happy to do that. Again, it was an interesting learning curve. I think people think it just because you know astronomy, you know physics, you know chemistry and biology, you can teach it. That's certainly not true.
Good point.
And I want to say it, I use this analogy.
Very good point.
You know, for the past 25 years of my life, I flew on many airplanes. That doesn't mean that I can pilot a plane. And you wouldn't need me to do that. So just because I went to school for many years, and yes, I know the content knowledge, but that didn't mean I could teach. And I think it's very important, because when we talk about education outreach, we have to make very clear we are not substituting the role of teachers in schools. I have only great praises for the work that teachers do in school. I think, but we can do a lot of work to support their work and to complement it. So that's what really gradually I learned, that it was my strength and also what I could do, you know, looking for resources to do this. To work with kids outside of school hours, regular school hours, you know, I was mentioning to you before, and if people don't believe me, do the math yourself, do the math. A typical school, a student in school spends 80% of his or her time outside of a school building.
That is in 80%, right?
80.
Yes.
You know, including weekends and summer. So, but we have so much time where young people, I think it's important that are engaged in a positive way. Which means, of course, they have to do sports and arts, but they can do science. In a way that is different from the way they do it in school. We really need to use this time in a productive way. So that's what we are doing, though. Again, complement to support their work. That happens in a regular school hours.
It is very admirable, and you've had a most interesting career and very interesting background, and you're a great asset to these communities, and I thank you. I need to let you take questions, if you would, please.
Oh, I love
that. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll let you talk to some people here then. Okay.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming, by the way. Yes.
I went through some of the same things you've done, engineer. I even taught the MITES program, and I'm an MIT alumnus, so.
She knows the whole thing.
She knows the whole routine.
So my question is someone who's doing some of the same kinds of things, out of all you've observed, what's the one thing you think's most needed in these programs that we need to keep doing or try to do more, whether it's the connection with the schools or something specific with the children? I know it's
and I mean, you had just one. In a way, I think a connection with the schools, for example, obviously is important, but the more I think about that is really a connection with the families. And the families, the parents, and the people, the adults in the life of the children. Because I think too often the children are living like in two different worlds. When I'm in a place like mine, the world is like this. Or, programs I described before, we're doing science theater, but then they leave this building, they leave this environment, and there is a whole different environment. And, often I wish we could change society, because some of the environments where kids live, it's not their family's responsibility, but they're tough environments. But at least they have the support and the understanding of their families, and the participation in these activities, I think, could really help. If I had to pick one, but I would like to pick more.
That's a very interesting observation, because that I have to say that we are an immigrant culture, for example, and I believe it has been shown over and over again that the kids that come in, even with 10 words of English and who do so well, have family support. They may not have money, but the family is really behind them, and the kids feel like they can do anything if they have that. So somehow we have to come up with a way of providing that.
I'm saying that as part of the work I do now at the School of Engineering, I do a lot of internal evaluation of our programs, and we do ask what are the people whose opinion it's meaningful to you. And parents is the top. Parents and adults in their life, close guardians, but people take care of them. That's number one. Teachers are there as well. But, adults in their life that they can give, direction they rely on. So if we can connect with those parents, I mentioned before, I know it from my own experience. My parents, my mom finished high school, and my dad, it's more like, I guess here would be more like a GED program. But they were extremely supportive. As I said before, just go to school, just keep, education is important. I know that was key. I'm a very stubborn person, so probably I would have gone forward no matter what. No, but I don't know, maybe in different fields, in different areas. Well, I knew I got that message that education was important.
Well, I did see that teaching in MIT Upward Bound. That's when you really have a dissonance in environment. So.
Yeah.
I have to stop. You can continue to ask questions. I just have to stop recording. I'm sorry, because we've run out of time on this end, but you are very welcome to go ahead and finish your conversations. You can disconnect yourself if you'd like to. And thank you again very much for joining us. A very enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Just, I'll